All right, I would like to welcome to the stage Eve Boyle from the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House, who will be moderating today's panel. Joining her will be Jolene Jesse from the National Science Foundation, Emily Kuehn from the Department of Defense, Holly Miller from the Department of Education, Jorge Valdes from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. Thank you all very much.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Eve Boyle, and I'm a Senior Policy Advisor at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, which is also called OSTP. And I'm going to set the stage a little bit here to share what OSTP has talked about and worked on in relation to invention education over the past couple of years. Oh. Perfect. Thank you, Erin. So OSTP, in an effort to advance more equitable and prosperous science and technology ecosystem in the United States, the Biden-Harris administration has championed transformative investments in science and technology across the nation. And OSTP carries out President Biden's vision for STEM. And so among the many things that we do, we provide advice to the president. We strengthen and advance American science and technology. We work across federal departments and agencies and with Congress. We engage with many external partners. And we ensure equity, inclusion, and integrity in all aspects of science and technology policy. So innovation is a Biden-Harris administration priority, and President Biden often says that America can be defined in a single word: possibilities. And there have been many instances of Biden fulfilling his commitment to supporting innovation. There is a July 2023 executive order about invent it here, make it here. And there have been many investments in President Biden's 2025 budget plan that support the current and future generations of innovators, inventors, and entrepreneurs. So every 5 years, there is a federal STEM strategic plan, and the last one was published in 2018. And in this plan, one of the major pillars is engaging students where disciplines converge. And there was an interagency working group established to fulfill the work of this pathway. And many of the folks on the stage have been involved with this work. So convergence education, which was defined by this new interagency working group on convergence, is driven by compelling or complex socioscientific problems or topics where learners apply knowledge and skills using a blended approach across multiple disciplines to create and innovate new solutions. And part of this convergence education involves invention education. And I'll let the other panelists here give you some more information about that. The work of this IWG resulted in 2 main products. So the first was a report in November 2022. And if you scan that QR code, that'll take you directly to that report. And so the report provides many things. The first is an overview on the research of convergence education and how it can be applied to STEM education. A pedagogical framework for convergence education, which includes a definition, characteristics, goals, and benefits, recommended tools and processes for achieving convergence education, a pathway to convergence education through STEM learning, teaching, and assessment, and a summary of promising and established practices, which includes invention education as a highlight of a promising and established practice. And it also includes recommendations for stakeholders. And then the next major output of that IWG was a January 2023 webinar that was titled Why Convergence Education? Preparing for the Future of STEM. And so the QR code on the left side of the slide links to the readout, or links to the recording of the webinar on YouTube. And then the one on the right links to an article that summarizes the webinar. And the webinar showcased the convergence education report that I just mentioned. It explored the transition of convergence education from theory to practice and featured some best practices as well. And so the convergence education work was largely under the 2018 strategic plan, and now we are working to publish a new one. So this new strategic plan, we've held many public listening sessions and private meetings, many engagements with stakeholders like you about what should go into the plan. This QR code, I realize I have a lot, links to another article summarizing this engagement. And some of the key takeaways that we've heard from people all across the country about what should go into this new plan include that the future of STEM must incorporate authentic STEM learning experiences, provide exposure to STEM professionals, and give opportunities to practice STEM in the real world. STEM learning must be culturally relevant and offer a sense of belonging in STEM. Learning and working opportunities must be accessible to underrepresented, underserved, and under-resourced populations. It's pivotal to cultivate continuous educational and training pathways across the STEM lifespan. Co-created partnerships are needed across and between sectors. And there was a great need to strengthen recruitment and retention of STEM educators, including by expanding opportunities for professional development. And I hope you can all see how these takeaways relate to your work and how Invention Education can reflect all of this. And so if you have any ideas about what should go into this new 5-year strategic plan, there's an email address here, stemstrategy@ostp.aop.gov. We'd love to hear from you. This mailbox gets checked every single day by multiple people, and we really want to reflect your voices in this new plan. So I think I'm going to hand things off now to Jorge.
Thank you, Eve, for kicking us off. It's hard to believe that it was 18 months ago that we were here at a similar government agency panel where we actually made live salsa with our wonderful Kelly Day here. And thank you, Tom, for sharing your story. Your story needs to be amplified, as well as many other stories of amazing educators who are doing amazing things to help advance this national community in invention education. I'm looking at some of them right here. So I'm Jorge Valdes. I'm with the Office of Education at the USPTO. We recently became part of a newly created business unit at the USPTO called the Office of Public Engagement. And our goal here simply is to get more people and communities around the nation involved in the innovation ecosystem, right? We've been talking a lot this week about ecosystems. This is part of this innovation ecosystems. And really to begin to teach everyone about the benefits and the importance of protecting intellectual property. We want to provide the tools, we want to provide the resources that you all need to turn your creative ideas into real-world solutions that have real-world impact. So a few weeks ago, where is David? David Corona. A few weeks ago, David and I ran into each other here in DC at a symposium at the National Academy of Sciences and Medicine on the topic of supporting K-12 STEM education to create the foundations for innovation. And so I talked about this early entrepreneurship in K-12, and it was the first time ever that the national academies had addressed this topic at the K-12 level. So I think our communities are converging, no pun intended, but I think we're onto something big as we talk about all these things kind of coming together. So today what I'd like to do is to kind of share with you how sort of nurturing young minds and invoking this notion of entrepreneurship education, which is ancillary to invention education, through invention education and intellectual property education. That's a lot of education, my God. Can foster innovation, right? And the creative mindset. All right. So I will show you 2 examples of things that we're doing at the USPTO that aligns really well and supports this notion of early entrepreneurship education. All right. Let me see. It's the big button, right? Okay. But I want to set the stage a little bit because this really blew me away. Surprising? Not really. But let's tune into what these facts. This is a Forbes headline, right? Forbes magazine. And you know, it's forecasting, right? And so, well, you know, anybody can forecast, I guess, but there is some real information here I think we need to pay attention to. So, and the forecast is this: half of all skills will be outdated within 2 years. Really? And so executives in Fortune 500 companies are saying that half of the skills today will no longer be relevant by 2025. That's like next year. 47 field workforces are unprepared for what lies ahead. And it's projected that 56% of entry-level knowledge worker roles might disappear in 5 years. So I remember it wasn't long ago that we were talking about the knowledge economy. So what's going on? So in fact, according to a new study that was just released yesterday, stated that AI, artificial intelligence, could eliminate up to 8 million jobs in the United Kingdom alone, and cautions the following, right? That women and early career employees are most at risk of being put out of work, right? This is the reality that we're living with. Yet, within this disruption, there's a silver lining, like with most things, right? The human elements of creativity, agility, and tenacity kind of remain irreplaceable by AI. Maybe, I'm not sure. The growing importance of skills such as critical thinking, logical intelligence, interpersonal capabilities, collaboration, right? And one of the things that the CIO of Procter & Gamble, I spent the summer there working as an undergraduate student, talks about the importance of problem definition phase, right? So it's problem solving, but as important, you have to define the problem. And it's not a once and done. It oftentimes is an iterative process, because you think you know what the problem is, and as you work through it, you realize, that's not the problem. It's another problem that I'm really trying to solve. So what this slide, I think, helps us to begin to think about as a community is the urgency for reskilling, upskilling, and the timeless value, if you will, of uniquely human traits, right, in navigating the future of our workplace. And these are the same values, by the way, that we hold near and dear as part of this community that we love so much, the InventEd community. Okay. All right. I think Eve already touched on this a little bit out of this report, which I had the privilege of working with a lot of amazing people across the federal government. This is part of the definition for convergence education, which is a new word. Write that down, convergence education. I worked at Bell Labs for many, many years, and this is how we operated. The real world operates in a convergence kind of way. I think about it as you learn what you need to learn to solve problems. It's on-demand learning. Let's coin that word, on-demand learning, right? But doesn't this portray what we're here to do? Isn't this really speaks to clearly and loudly invention education? I think it does. And I think it's stated really well in the report. So thank you to all my colleagues for helping us to get this out. And in fact, I remember Kelly Day walking in, running in and saying, the White House has published the report. We were so excited because we were waiting, impatiently for it. All right, so I probably don't need to speak to this too much because, there's been a lot of discussions around why this is important. And you can kind of read through this, right? One of the things that's unique to the USPTO is this notion of intellectual property, right? And if you don't know what that is, how many of you have heard of intellectual property before? And the MTIP teachers can't raise their hands. So most of you, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. But oftentimes we think about that sort of at the back end, right, of the invention process. And we want to turn and flip that around and offer that an intellectual property could be and should be considered as a front-end piece in the invention education process. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide. And last year, I think, we launched Equip HQ. Yes, everybody's, ooh. So instead of saying it in words, why don't we just see a video? It does a much better job at explaining it, and my voice is running out. So let's see. Hopefully this will work. Do I have to press it again? Yeah. Uh-oh, no sound. Well, so Equip HQ. You want to rewind it, David? Okay, great.
Get to know Equip HQ. From the United States Patent and Trademark Office is built to teach important concepts about intellectual property, or IP, and to encourage young people to participate in the culture of innovation by recognizing the value of putting ideas into action. Equip HQ offers free, standards-aligned lesson plans that are designed to introduce invention education and intellectual property concepts to K-12 students. Teachers can use the site to find structured activities for their classrooms.
All right, did you like that? Yeah, let's give it. And I think there's one or two sessions later today or this afternoon. Some of my colleagues from the USPTO will be talking more in depth about that. And then the final plug is, so the USPTO does a lot of work in teacher professional development. And our 10th year anniversary edition will be held right here across the street at our headquarters. This will be the hotel that we will be conducting this event. And it's essentially a one-week boot camp to learn all about the intersection of innovation, STEM, intellectual property. So the application deadline is, I think, the 31st of March. So it's coming up in a couple days. You know, please help us continue to spread the word about this opportunity. And my colleagues have encouraged me to make sure that we put free. We'll pay for your trip to DC, your food. This is the hotel you're staying. It's a nice hotel. Yeah, and I know some of you are alumni from this program. Who are the alumni? Oh, yeah. And you loved it, right? Yeah, good. Yeah, $20 later. Okay. All right, without further ado, I will pass it on to my dear colleague. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. All right, so it's great to be here with all of you. My name is Emily Kuehn. I serve as the Deputy Director for the Department of Defense, specifically covering our K-12 STEM education and outreach efforts and beyond. And so my introduction is a little easier since Tom told you a little bit that you might not have already realized that the Department of Defense does when it comes to the continuum of education opportunities offered through the Department of Defense. So why does the Department of Defense invest in STEM education? We actually get this question a lot because a lot of people aren't aware of the work that we do. And I think that a lot of these points, this group here doesn't need to have or hear reiterated. What you might not know is the Department of Defense is the largest federal employer of scientists and engineers. So you think of Department of Defense, most people do, I assume most of you here. Think of Army, Navy, Air Force, the Armed Services, some of those traditional roles we think of with Department of Defense. Those all happen, but also we have significant investments in pre-K through 20 and beyond education opportunities. And a few of the reasons are to support that network of scientists and engineers that operate across the DoD who develop and research groundbreaking technologies that support our warfighter in the field, but also have key connections to all of you here in this room. So one of my favorite examples is an Army Research Institute I used to work at, had participation in every known malaria treatment ever developed to date. Things you don't think the department is doing, they're out there doing, and it requires really excellent STEM professionals to get that work done. I don't need to remind this group that diversity is key and diversity drives innovation. Our aim is to reach every student and to match our demographics to those students who are here across the US. That includes for us a priority on populations who traditionally have not seen great access to STEM education opportunities, including rural, women in certain STEM fields, some of our ethnic and racial minorities. I'll also highlight for us a priority is military-connected students. Those are the dependents of our armed service members, reserves, and National Guard. That's because they move quite frequently to accommodate the style of life that their parent or guardian has to live. And so those are key populations for us to serve. And then finally, again, for the DoD, when you look at that workforce piece, the connection to our later high school, our college, our undergrad, our graduate students, that connection is really clear, right? We need that near-term workforce development, but the K-12 piece is so essential. We need them to be ready by the time they get to those older levels so that they can come in and join us on this great adventure. So what kind of work do we do in the STEM education space? A few things I'll mention is DoD STEM is huge. So we're talking about programs that are run across the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Space Force, in addition to program partners we support. So annually, DoD STEM supports on the order of 150 to 200 programs that reach 1 million students and 30,000 educators. Those are built around the fundamentals of building foundations in STEM literacy, increasing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and preparing our workforce of the future. These opportunities, as I mentioned, range from pre-kindergarten all the way through postdoctoral and continuing education, and they take the form of things like enrichment activities, camps, project-based competitions, scholarships, internships, and career development. And as I mentioned, we have a huge reach across the students and educator populations we serve. So why invention and innovation for DoD? So as I mentioned, the DoD has this diverse set of problems that we are trying to solve when it comes to the work that we do in the department. And so some of the essential pieces around innovation to keep the defense enterprise moving include things like enhancing our military capabilities and adapting to the emerging global threats. It includes maintaining our U.S. technological superiority and preparing for future challenges and opportunities that may impact national security. I'm sure I don't need to tell this community that national security goes beyond what we typically think of in terms of external threats and sort of the warfighter element. It also goes into elements like climate change and pandemic preparedness, and those are threats that the Department of Defense takes very seriously. It also includes stimulating economic growth and job creation across the nation, and an essential element to what we do is around collaboration and partnerships and fostering a culture of creativity and agility. And I'll just highlight, under the National Defense Science and Technology Strategy, this is a strategic document that comes out every 3 to 5 years. The department identifies what it calls critical technology areas. And these are areas of that recognize the varied and complex areas of investment, development, and application of technology in the 21st century. I don't think I need to tell this group that on that list of critical technology areas, invention, innovation, and entrepreneurship are essential to making that successful. So we center a lot of our work around looking at how do we prepare students to think about quantum science? How do we prepare students to think about artificial intelligence, biotechnology? How do we get them the fundamentals to be ready to participate in those fields? And these critical technology areas will evolve. This isn't set in stone, and we will see future changes. So a few quick highlights, and then I'll highlight some of these in more detail when we get to the question and answer portion of this. But some ways that the DoD brings together our STEM education investments with this element of innovation, entrepreneurship, and invention. We have partnerships and investments with numerous partners that include grants and cooperative agreements to develop novel approaches and scale evidence-based practices. We work through our armed services and the research centers we have across the nation, as well as colleges and universities, to offer research opportunities around internships, scholarships, and fellowships. We feature DoD researchers and their efforts through mentorship and engagement of those scientists and engineers and their work with students. We invest in educators. So Tom, who spoke to you here, was a great example of our DoD Ambassador Program, where we invest in educators directly to help promote their efforts and give them the tools they need for their classroom. And finally, embedding invention, innovation, entrepreneurship into all of our student opportunities. And so I have a couple examples highlighted that I won't mention, but I will leave that there for a moment, and I will speak to some of these as we get into our panel. And I will close by saying we have a phenomenal website. I'm very proud of it. We have so many resources on there, so I encourage you to check us out at dodstem.us. Kind of similar to what Jorge presented, it's all sortable by opportunities of age bands and all of that great stuff and the types of things you might be looking for. So thank you for your time and attention, and I will turn it over to Jolene.
Oh, thanks. That's okay. Hi, everyone. I am Jolene Jesse. I'm a program director at the National Science Foundation in our Directorate for STEM Education. If you look in your convergence report, you'll see that the term convergence actually started at NSF. And we've been doing convergence for a long time, both in our research, and in our education our education directorate. And so our tagline has always been where discoveries begin, but it's also where convergence begins. The Directorate for STEM Education, or EDU as we call it, has 4 different divisions. My division is the Division for Research on Learning. I see at least one colleague in the audience as well, in the back there, Bob Russell, is with me as well. I'll briefly talk about some opportunities in the other divisions, but really the Division for Research and Learning is where our K through 12 STEM education and our informal STEM education is housed. So we literally do from pre-K through gray, everything in between. And this includes multiple different settings, formal settings like classrooms, of course, but then also museums and libraries and community centers and lots of different settings that are important. So here's our Division for Research on Learning. As I said, we focus on projects that improve our understanding of STEM learning and teaching and education from infancy to old age. Our mission is to promote innovation, knowledge, and cutting-edge practices in STEM education, and we have done this with a lens on initiative and creativity, real-world problem-solving, and multidisciplinary approaches for decades. Here's our programs, our core programs. As you'll see, they really do cover all the areas that I just mentioned. Advancing Informal STEM Learning, or our AZLE program, our Innovative Technologies Experiences for Students and Teachers, or ITEST, our Discovery Research Pre-K-12, or DRK-12, and Computer Science for All, which does a lot of research practice partnerships between teachers and researchers. And then we have also our Research on Innovative Technologies for Enhanced Learning, or our new RIDLE program. And I really don't have time to talk about all of those, but let me go back. I don't have time to talk about all these. If you're interested in any of these programs, definitely shoot me an email. I'm at jjesse@nsf.gov. And I am happy to talk with you about those opportunities. So for decades, we really have been funding everything from problem-based learning to team science, maker spaces, making and engineering design, work-based learning, applied learning, career and technical education, disciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary research and education, diversity, equity, and inclusion in STEM, and teacher professional development and educator professional development. So for example, I love this example because this was funded first in 2001. It is the Exploratorium at San Francisco developed the Play, Invent, Explore Institute through a grant from NSF. This is ongoing. You can go on this website, and it integrates science, art, and learning technologies to explore the world around us. It's a free resource, and you can go on and on their website and download materials. As I said, we've been funding invention-based makerspace efforts that include lots of different examples of how this works. For example, at the Science Museum of Minnesota, they had a whole cardboard making exhibit for local people to come in and build things like cardboard cannons. Makerspaces that are creating community engineering experts with students from historically marginalized communities in Lansing, Michigan, and Greensboro, North Carolina, and Baltimore, Maryland. And one of my favorites is always SciGirls. If you haven't ever logged in to see SciGirls, it has been ongoing for more than 20 years now. We've been funding SciGirls, and there's lots and lots of different SciGirl shows, but also then materials for educators and for families and for communities to use. And there's many other examples like this. And I just wanted to point to this, it's not totally new, but it's somewhat new, our Engage AI Institute, which is using AI to create collaborative, story-based projects that provide learning experiences through AI. So if you're interested in AI, we have a number of AI institutes. The Engage AI is the closest that's doing this kind of convergence education for students and teachers. So there's also things on their website. And if you want to learn more about our programs and what we funded and different projects that have been funded, all of our programs have resource centers, and those resource centers are meant to showcase both what is being done, but also to provide you resources if you're interested in NSF funding. So you can learn more about our programs, our funding opportunities, our resources, information that's all sponsored by our different programs. The ASL has the Revise Center, DRK-12 has Cadre, iTest has Stellar, and the Center for Integrative Research, Computing, and Learning Sciences, or CIRCLE, supports our RIDLE program. And other places in NSF also fund maker and invention and innovation. We do have a new directorate. It's the directorate it's called TIP, the Directorate for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. Again, we've been doing this kind of convergence education that includes entrepreneurship and building business savvy for STEM professionals. So it's more in the adult learning area, but TIP has a lot of opportunities in that space. Our SBIR programs and our I-Core program are all housed in our TIP directorate. They also have a convergence accelerator. They've got regional engines and other opportunities that are much broader, but that really kind of demonstrate how NSF is kind of at this cutting edge of convergence. And I do want to say that the Directorate for STEM Education, we're the largest federal funder of STEM education. And so and we've been doing it for 50 years. So thank you. I think that's it. I'll get to hand it to Holly.
everyone. I am Holly Miller. I am the Afterschool and Summer Learning Advisor at the Department of Education. I am housed at the Institute of Education Sciences, which is the research branch of the Department of Ed. Just very briefly, I was a middle school STEM teacher, and so I think everything that I look at, even though I'm an educational research scientist now, is through the lens of a teacher. I taught integrated STEM, but I was also a camp invention coach, and I got a makerspace at my school. So, federal perspective. It's actually in our Constitution. I didn't know if you realized that, but we've been prioritizing this for a long time. The issue is there's not equitable access to learning opportunities within STEM, and we know that STEM readiness is low and not distributed evenly across groups. So the Institute of Education Sciences puts out a report on the condition of education, and if you check out the latest results, you already know what it's going to say. Anyone that works in the classroom that interfaces with children knows that we are in a really critical time right now. We have a critical teacher workforce shortage. Our kids are suffering, and we need to do something about it. Our NAEP scores, so academic, educational progress, way down. And anyone, again, that was working with kids during the pandemic, there's no surprise. I could have saved someone millions of dollars because I taught during the pandemic. The disengagement was high. It was a real challenge. Teachers were doing the best that they could, but it was an impossible situation. So reading scores are down for our 13-year-olds, math way down. Same thing for our 9-year-olds. No surprise there. So what is the Department of Education doing to rectify these situations? A variety of things, many things actually. So there's a variety of funding. For example, American Rescue Plan funding was unprecedented in the amount of funds dedicated to after school and summer learning specifically. All states had a set aside that they had to use specifically for those purposes. Right now in the Department of Education, there are several initiatives that if you're not familiar with, please come and find me, or you could just do a general search. But You Belong in STEM, Raising the Bar, and Engage Every Student are three that I want to highlight. And also research, which is the part that I focus on. We are doing lots of grant funding, education, research, and innovation grants to promote new thinking. The Department of Education recognizes that we're in trouble right now and we need to think innovatively to get ourselves out of this situation. So shameless plug, I wrote about this specifically. I think that we have to consider after school and summer learning as one of our best bets right now. I've been here with the research working group this week. There's a lot of conversation about how do we get invention education into the formal classroom. Yes, absolutely. That's a huge lift right now because teachers are trying to make up for this massive learning loss. So while we continue to promote in-school learning for invention education, we really need to capitalize on the funding and opportunities for after-school and summer learning. What's significant about it? So I've taught both. I've taught in the formal classroom and I've taught out of school. I've done after-school clubs and summer learning. There are huge differences between the two. From a teacher perspective, when I am in the classroom, I know that I'm being evaluated. I know that I have scores that I have to get up. I'm under a certain kind of pressure. When I taught camp invention, no such pressure, no observation. Kids were free to fail forward, as I call it, and it just ignited a special kind of magic in kids that was unique to that environment. So, like I said, unprecedented funding resources to make this happen right now. We are approaching a fiscal cliff, but with the right evidence, I believe that we can get additional funding. We know all of the benefits of out-of-school time STEM. We've seen this, right? And so the leadership and decision-making in invention education, I think it's hard to compare that to anything else. The peer relationships, the real world work opportunities, problem-based learning, just so many opportunities that enhance what they are learning during the school day. I understand that while we're in a really critical situation, I also believe that this is an opportunity to right some systemic wrongs in education, so let's take advantage of it. So I think that STEM historically has been disproportionately impacted, represented, but we have a chance to fix some of those things right now with special funding, with special program opportunities. My huge caveat is we have to have evidence on what is working. For example, as I said, I work at the Institute of Education Sciences, which is the home of What Works Clearinghouse. This is where all things live about what works in education. If you are asking for federal funding from the Department of Ed, they're going to say, what evidence-based strategies will you be using in this program? And you will go to What Works Clearinghouse, find something that shows strong evidence, and use that to get your funding. Last night, I did a little search for Invention Education. Guess how many entries I found? 1. And it was explicitly engineering curriculum. I'm concerned about this. Different things are prioritized in the clearinghouse. If you are in the field and you are conducting research, you have got to share, you have got to publish, you have got to make known what's happening with your program. It is critical. Evidence is critical right now. I know that research is a hard lift. I know that there's additional money that's required to evaluate, but it is essential that we prove to everyone that doesn't live in this room right now why Invention Education is such a huge, important part of what needs to happen in our children's education. A few resources. There's lots of funding, there's lots of initiatives. Like I said, just come up and ask me about it. I'll help you find all the things that you need. But I want to say very strongly, the Department of Education, the Secretary of Education, the White House, they are all emphasizing 3 things in education right now. They're working on chronic absenteeism, they're working on high dosage tutoring, and they're working on out-of-school time learning. Knowing that these are priorities, take advantage of this, please. Please take advantage of the fact that they're saying, hey, we really need to focus on this right now to get our kids back on track, and use that to get Invention Education to all children, not just the ones that have access to transportation or funding, but all children need equal opportunities to experience the magic that is Invention Education. Thank you. I don't know who's, do we leave it?
Thank you. So we're going to continue our discussion with some questions for our panelists. So the first question is, the STEM fields have recognized the need for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary learning and teaching. How has innovation, entrepreneurial, and invention education transformed in the last few years in ways that sync up with the changes that we're seeing in STEM learning and teaching?
Go ahead. Oh, I just finished. So one of the things that is unique right now is the request for innovative research. The department wants to know what you're doing that's new and different. I'm not sure if anyone in this room is familiar with DARPA. That's the experimental research program. There's a lot of conversation about having the same kind of thing at Ed, like an ARPA Ed, which I think would be fantastic. And there's a huge push for new and innovative. Tell us what you're doing that's possible and fabulous. Nope.
Try the green light. See if it's off.
Use Jorge's.
I'm going to holler. Oh,
Oh! We can hear you.
you can hear me now. All right, I'll add to that. On behalf of the Department of Defense, I also think we're seeing this parallel evolution of the technology that's impacting our communities and our real lives, and how that's implemented in the classroom. So ChatGPT, AI, it's coming, it's here, we're integrating it. And so I think we have to use that as a tool and encourage our students to not see those as a beast or an intimidation, not encourage our teachers to be afraid of those, because these are powerful technologies that are going to continue in our world, and I think that's one that we look at a lot at the Department of Defense. I'll also mention we're looking at ecosystems, leveraging partnerships, integrating into industry, and I think that goes really parallel with the invention education community.
these students, these educators, y'all have to work with your communities to find ways that we bolster those local economies and that we integrate into the communities and the resources that exist there. And as federal partners, we want to help invest in that effort. Anything else, team?
I just want to add that I think one of the biggest, most dynamic areas right now is in career and technical education. That seems to be a field that was kind of in the backwater for a long time, and actually we didn't really always consider it to be STEM per se because it wasn't a bench science or something like that. But I think there's a real recognition, and especially with the CHIPS and Science Act, that career and technical education that starts maybe in high school and sometimes in middle school and continues up into community colleges and maybe into four-year education has a big role to play in building the STEM workforce that we need in the future. And so I think that has been the recognition of career and technical education and the movement towards integrating technology and other elements into that has been a real, I think, game changer for the STEM workforce, and especially, as I said, with the CHIPS and Science Act and other efforts by the federal government to bring manufacturing and advanced manufacturing back into the United States. That area has been really, really important, and that's kind of where InventEd is really at home.
Yep. I'd like to follow up. A couple of weeks ago, the National Science Board had a readout at the White House. They publish biannually the science and engineering indicators. And I watched it live, and then I watched it again as I drove from New Jersey, where I live here. One thing that stood out for me, and I was sharing this with some of my friends here in the audience, was this notion of there's 37 million jobs, STEM jobs, right? 37. But it breaks down, surprisingly, 18 million of those jobs are STEM professionals with a bachelor's degree or higher. 19, which adds up to 37, right? 19 million are what they call the STEM technical workforce. These are students that do not have bachelor's degree. They might have an associate's degree or perhaps an invention education degree of some sort, right? But they're part of that larger ecosystem that we call the STEM. So thinking about how do we prepare students for the future, it's not always the academic route to the PhD. We got all these doctors up there. And someone asked me recently, well, should I get a PhD? And my immediate reaction was like, no, there's a lot more possibilities. Well, it depends, right? That's the right answer. If you want to do research, you got to get these advanced degrees. But there are so many possibilities, and invention education is an on-ramp for our students in America to see the plethora of possibilities that exist. And in this ever quickly and changing environment that, Emily, you just mentioned, and others.
Thank you. That's a great segue to our next question. So how do invention education, STEM innovation, and entrepreneurship intersect and enhance each other? And why is this overlap critical for cultivating future innovators?
Jorge, please.
Oh, boy, that's my question. I was thinking about this last night at the bar.
Where all best thoughts are had.
And I had great ideas. And one of our master teachers, we have a number of master teachers. Tom mentioned it earlier. It's a program we started about a year ago in collaboration with an organization, women-owned organization. She's sitting right back there. She knows. Kahadijiah, STEM is Ed, in an attempt to augment what the office does in teacher professional development and going out and teaching about not only invention education, but the connection to, why are we talking about intellectual property and how does it fit in and why should we worry about it, et cetera. But I see all these terms that we use, and sometimes they're confusing. And I'll give you an example. We say invention education. We talk about innovation. We talk about entrepreneurship. We talk about convergence and convergence education, which we coined in that report. And now you add that intellectual property. So where are we? How does this all stuff? Well, I don't know the real answer. There's smarter people out here that probably know the answer. But it's really an ecosystem. It's not one against the other, but it's part of this ecosystem of knowledge and experiences, right? I think one of the things that to me kind of resonates is this notion that oftentimes when we talk about entrepreneurship, it connotes business, right? And it is, right? Because new businesses are being formed. But are we turning away students that are kind of STEM focused and they're saying, no, I want to be in STEM. Entrepreneurship is something different, and I don't want to pursue that path. So I think we got to look at this ecosystem truly holistically because they all belong together. You belong. Oh, that's it.
Well, and I think, so USPTO and NSF have been talking and partnering with each other for a while now to bring that kind of IP education, talking about entrepreneurship and innovation with a lot of our grantees who might not realize that what they are doing, certainly with our NSF Includes initiative, for example, where they are doing a lot of STEM education, but hadn't quite made the connection that there's more to it than just the basic disciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinariness of it. You really need to know where you want to go with your ideas and your creativity and your thinking about how to problem solve. And that's where I think we need to think very differently about how we prepare students to think about, well, what might be the possibilities? I don't want to say next steps because I think, Jorge, you said it very eloquently in your talk that it has to start at the beginning. That you start to think, oh, I have possibilities open to me with both my STEM education and thinking about how this solves a problem in my community. And then how do I then think about taking it further?
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I'll just say, I think that intersectionality of these concepts is really critical. And we're learning too in the federal space to be more inclusive with our language, but we also encourage you to look at, when we put out funding calls, it may not call out invention education, but you fit the mold of so many things that we're trying to fund. And it may not, you may be funding entrepreneurship that touches to STEM, right? So these intersections, I think, are important for us to be thoughtful of.
Thank you. And so to move on now to talk about some recent research insights, are there some examples within convergence education where we see STEM and invention education being applied? Are there any recent developments that help to highlight this, or any emerging research areas that hold promise for advancing invention education?
I'll do a shameless plug for Joanna Garner's work. She was with me in the, she was working with us in the research working group a couple days ago, and the notion of an inventive identity, which I think is just fantastic. And so really starting to think about that it lives everywhere. I know that this is a STEM-specific panel, but invention education is in all disciplines, and it is a mindset. And I think we really have to work on shifting the narrative about this, that, is it a quality, is it a skill? I think kids are inventive, and how do we work that into multiple kinds of classrooms, multiple kinds of contexts? And so if you're not familiar with that research, I strongly recommend having a look at it, because I do think it's worth your time.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, would you like to
No,
add?
go ahead.
Okay. So my last question for the panel before we open it up to your questions is, how can the attendees here today actively contribute to and influence the broader dialogue on this topic? What steps can everyone in this room take locally or regionally to drive meaningful change and outcomes in this field?
I would love to start. I actually came here. I haven't been able to join this event till today because I was at another DoD-funded event down in North Carolina. And it's a project we funded for 3 years, and what they're doing is they're doing a pre-K through 12th grade STEM competition where students develop innovative ideas and projects that solve issues astronauts might have in space. And then when they present at this expo that I attended, the research isn't done. The projects and the things they've developed aren't complete because they've all developed something that's designed to then go to space and be completed. And there are 3 teams who are selected to be awarded at this, and their projects are literally sent into space up on the International Space Station, and then they come back. And that was just such a crystallization of solving some of what we're trying to do here. And I really was drawn to the fact that one of the winning teams was 2nd graders. And they were so innovative and creative, and it took a community to make that happen. It took the teachers in the room, it took the parents, it took industry partners who made that possible. And this was a rural, under-resourced school district that has not seen this kind of engagement from their students. And I heard from teachers, the projects they saw in the first year of the program compared to the 3rd year have just completely changed. And it's because of the capacity we gave educators. And so I mentioned that example because it draws to mind a few things. I think drawing on your local community resources is an essential piece, looking for those connections, looking for how we pull people into these types of activities. I also think it's about being thoughtful of how we frame this for our students. Those 2nd graders never thought they would see an experiment go into space, but they will. They're going to see their experiment go into space. And so I think reminding them what they're capable of, and I think invention really helps students have that lens of the possibility. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing wonderful story, is we talk about reaching students, but whether it's informal, and I love what you said, Holly, about informal education, we need to do both, but educators is our gateway there. And so I know we have a lot of educators here, we do a lot of professional development, helping to really carry the message forward, and leadership, teacher leaders, see a lot of them right here and others around, we're in this together, right? And so I think we play a critical role. And as leaders, whether you're an educator or not, to carry, I like the word possibilities, because this notion of invention education offers all these unique possibilities, right? Thinking about what you can do that you didn't think you could, that it was possible, I mean, that's a lifelong lesson that carries, it's just really powerful. But
Thank you.
I'll just add, collect data, conduct research. If you feel like quantitative design is too overwhelming, collect stories. I always say that numbers plus stories is the most impactful way to move the needle. So if you need help getting started, please reach out. There's lots of people that want to help you conduct research. Even on an informal level, just share your stories. If you're doing something fantastic, pull somebody into your classroom, pull somebody into your summer camp, let them see. It sells itself. When you see kids excited and building, it's an easy sell. It really is. So share your stories.
I would love to just add, bring your principals, bring your administrators to those, share that excitement with them.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to questions from you all now. We have about 10 minutes for that, and there are 4 microphones along the middle of the room for you to use.
My name is Jill Ott. I'm the Executive Director of Science Coach. We build that research ecosystem to support teachers. So I've got cards ready to talk to you afterwards. But my specific question is a tactical one. So there was, Dr. Boyle, you had a bunch of really cool slides, and one of them had like the 5 pillars of what that report summarized, and it flipped by so fast I couldn't get a copy, I couldn't get a picture of that. So if whoever is managing the PowerPoint, if they could go back to the slide before the key public,
got you.
the key takeaways, that would be awesome.
Just see if there's anything.
Emily was a big part of this report, so she knows exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, and the second thing is, there was a ton of links and a ton of resources. As a person who has the stories and documents, and I would love to share it in the What Works Clearinghouse, I did not even know that existed until somebody mentioned it at this conference. All of those links, it's like, how do the people who know this information, like, how do I get access to all those links? Because I took pictures, but finding that link and making that connection to, like, how do I actually find the dollars without spending $10,000 to do a government grant? And that's the bridge between the practitioners and the researchers. You know, I'm a practitioner. I've got 16 years of data, over 100 data points, and I've got amazing stories, but I don't know how to connect those in a way that says what we have works. I've got data that shows it works. I have data that shows a workforce, and I know I'm not alone with people with successful programs, but I don't know how to share it. I don't know how to communicate it.
I just have a question. I don't know, are our slides being shared with the group? Maybe. Yeah, because I know it's resource rich, and I think everybody should have access. Some people are wise and use a QR code. Others of us are lazy and don't do that. But and I know that I already gave you my contact information at the research group. But yeah, please seek us out, and if you can't find us, I'm sure you can, network and find out more. Because it's huge. I mean, the things that you're asking to do are huge. It's too much work for one person, so you need partnerships to get those things off the ground. And I'm excited that you're sitting on that kind of data.
And go ahead.
Oh, you go.
I would just say a couple quick things. Yes, the federal government is huge, and we are constantly trying to improve how we consolidate our resources and get them available to folks in one place. I would say DoD has making strides too. When you go to our website, we link to other federal partners' websites. So we do try to give you like that one-stop shop of, hey, we're here, but also you might know USPTO, Ed, NSF. I also encourage you to look at grants.gov. That might already be something on your radar, but for those in the room who aren't, that's where most of our funding opportunities are posted. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to mention in terms of federal resources where things are consolidated.
I was going to say, so your comment is extremely helpful because all of us work on federal coordination, federal coordinated, cohesive strategies and ways to make these opportunities more available to everyone. And so I think we can take this feedback and try to figure out ways for us to better communicate and promote all of our opportunities to you. So thank you. And then,
But I also want to say there's networks that are also available to you to do things like share your things, like the National Girls Collaborative Project, NGCP, I think it's ngcp.org. You can go there and you can share your stories, your data, your outputs, your activities. So I would also seek out networks where that is a norm. We also, the NSF Includes program initiative at NSF is all about building those kinds of networks where things can be shared and where resources can get out there further.
thank you, Jolene.
Jill, thank you for that question. Again, I just wanted to clarify, is the interest in sort of disseminating the data and the work that, wonderful work that you and your team have done, but is it also in search of potential grants that might result because you have the evidence?
It is both.
Both,
So I've tried 2 government grants. A lot of the paperwork that was required was like very specialized, to use acronyms I had no idea. So I hired a grant writer who knew how to submit government grants. I've spent $10,000 to do that. I'm a nonprofit organization, and I finally went, okay, obviously I don't know how to write these grants, and I'm out of resources to try to to tell the government, okay, I've got something that works. So, and it's, you know, it's not like you guys aren't doing good enough. It's that I don't know how to navigate the system. And there's a learning curve
There is a learning
to
curve.
that navigation. And there's so many different, now with the single sign-on, that's a lot easier, but there's so many different sign-ons and each one expires at a different time.
Yeah.
You know, I have a little experience, you know,
Yeah.
and so it just makes it like, I don't have, as a nonprofit, and a practitioner, I don't have all of those resources to dedicate somebody to, you know, doing that component. And those specialized people are very expensive.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll say, agree.
Thank you for hearing us.
Yeah, no, I think the feedback's helpful. I'll also click us ahead. I don't know, Eve, I hope I'm not overstepping. I'll put that email address up that you can write to OSCP and share this feedback and say that these sorts of
feel
things.
free to move the slide.
I will also say that there are efforts from our end of trying to make these things more equitable. So I know from DOD and from my personal work, yeah, that's right. The STEM Funders Network, I think, is a particular organization that has looked at how do we help funders make their money more equitably available. I think there's a lot of things we can do as agencies to be more thoughtful about that. And I'll share from our work, we're increasingly doing webinars and pre-prep sessions for folks who may not have applied to our grants before to really give them that thorough understanding. But we also hear you that we can do better. So I think we all appreciate that feedback.
Yeah, I would also add, if there's an opportunity that you're interested in, email and contact whoever that program officer or contact is. They can and should and will answer you and help you. You can draft up a one-page description of your proposed idea. They can provide feedback on the appropriateness of the idea, where it could best fit at that agency. And I think just leverage as many of the available resources that we have right now, and more are coming. We're trying to do better, as Emily mentioned.
That was a very helpful process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ed Murray. I'm a high school chemistry teacher from Minnesota. We have in our building built up through lots of years of putting things together, a program that we feel is moving forward. And really, I don't have a whole lot more to say other than to echo Jill, because when I came up here was our success would not be success if we didn't have a funded individual in our building to help connect us to business partners, to help us find grants, to help us find that. We would be nowhere. And we're blessed that we have that. But if we want to make this go larger, we need liaisons between schools and government agencies that are easily accessible, that we can help figure that out. And so my question is no longer a question, because I think Jill pretty much answered it, but just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Shri Vivek. I'm the co-director of EMU Invent program. I'm also a professor at Eastern Michigan University, and we do programs from K through 12, which is Invention program. And then there is a flip program where a student who loves technology learns technology and then applies it to a real problem. The problem we face is the students do it for 2-3 years, and then we start to lose them because you see that technologies are evolving. Whatever I teach them last year is already becoming obsolete pretty quickly. So we've been looking for something that can, something like internships. I think that's the closest word to it. But nobody gets internship before 18, but these are the students we caught at 10 and 11 years of age. And we're losing them because there is no way they can keep practicing it except playing games, right? So I don't know, what are your thoughts about it? Because we've tried to look for internships and continued learning opportunities for these kids before they get to college and right when they are into college. So we've started dual enrollment and undergraduate programs for them, but not every kid can afford that in our university. So what are your thoughts on keeping these kids in that pipeline before they just divorce to something that's more established?
I don't know if you're aware, but DOD does offer internships before students are 18. And it might be a language choice. So sometimes we refer to them as apprenticeships. There's also, like, I'll use an example off the top of my head. Air Force Legacy is a program that's built to basically prepare students to enter internships. So it could also be about exploring some of the opportunities that are out there that might not meet the description you're envisioning, but I do think those opportunities exist. This calls back to we could make these more obvious and easy to access, right? But I will just comment that I do think those opportunities exist. I think you're on the right track with how we get students there, and I would encourage you to look at what exists in your community, both from our federal partners like us here, but also industry partners who might be in the area, and even reaching out to coordinators at those industries to say, hey, I have these students. What can you offer them? How can I get them into this work? How can I get them engaged? And see what kind of response you get.
So we do work with a lot of businesses. For instance, Toyota funds us, the Spark Innovation Center funds us. Everywhere we go, it's like, oh, we can help anybody 18 and above.
I see.
But then those 2 years is when the students kind of like where we lose them. They're not grown up enough to go into all government sites and look for something, and we don't have enough resources to do that. So maybe I'm just wondering, can we apply for a grant to do something like that? Or
Yes.
can we get underserved kids and pay them to be with us and learn, something like that? So would there be any kind of those grants? And it's also a call to everyone else if anybody's interested in doing something like this as a grant or any other effort.
I'll just add to that. You raise a good point about losing kids in the pipeline. We know that we have to start early. Like middle school is a key window, and I would argue even before middle school. But I would like to encourage you to think about the fact that you have planted seeds in those 10 and 11-year-olds. And so even if they go off to chase a squirrel or whatever's new and shiny in those because that's a hard competition, right? And as soon as something's made, it's already outmoded. But I would argue that planting those seeds, telling them that they are inventive, that they are good at math, that they can be an engineer, a scientist, whatever, that continues. That is in them. And so perhaps when they get to college, when they get some kind of work opportunity that is in that vein, they're still carrying that. Even if they're not following it all the way through to college, I would say that those seeds are still planted and they will sprout.
Mm.
Yeah, we're doing that.
No, good point.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing, Professor Avec, thank you for that question, because that is definitely a huge problem, particularly where students come from schools that are flourishing with invention education and this kind of learning, and they get to college and it's a crash, right? Well, this is not like what it was before. And I don't want to put my colleague, Jesse, on the line, but the National Science Foundation, their engineering research centers and their science and technology centers often have research opportunities for both undergraduate and in some cases high school students to experience what it's like doing research at a university.
And I just want to remind you the comment that Jonathan made during the panel 2 days ago. He was doing invention, and now he is in his engineering education, and now he doesn't have time or opportunity to continue actually inventing, right? So that's the gap I'm talking about here.
Yep.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.